Once a person have reached a certain level of criticism towards reality, it is difficult to turn back. Let me say again. Once a person reaches the capacity to criticize reality, it is very difficult to come back to a non-critic state, probably only by suffering some type of brain damage or death. That is, once one changes one's view on reality, this view cannot go back to a smaller state, to a less complex state. That is interesting to understand, because once you look at reality as it presents itself nowadays, we can read in different events through criticism and see what they are really all about. When we look at politics, when we look at economics, when we look at the social aspects of reality, we can criticize them. We don't need to judge. Judge is a very bad word. It's a very complicated word, to judge. But to criticize is more interesting. Philosophy, for example, aims on creating a critic view on reality. Remember, Socrates, for example, that is one of the well-known philosophers of Western philosophy. He was known to leave questions. In the dialogues, he makes the right questions. He's not looking for absolute answers, but is looking to criticize reality and himself. That is interesting to think about, my friends, because we can see it in other philosophies as well. For example, in Buddhism, as I said before, is a self-critic method. For example, through dhyana or seated meditation, one criticizes oneself through the observation of the line of thoughts, of the ocean, of the waves of thoughts in the mind, the endless wave of thoughts. The thing is that the world is thought and we are constantly thinking, but maybe we are not thinking the right way. That is, we should be thinking, using better our capacity to think. For example, when we criticize, we are thinking to make questions, precise questions that can, in some measure, allow us to see reality more deeper, to understand it better, and to find probably better answers. That's the thing about, my friends. For example, a good example is the World Cup. The World Cup now we know as the biggest event in human culture. That is, in numbers. We can discuss that. But the World Cup itself would be this great event to celebrate life, to celebrate all the peoples in the world, to celebrate all the countries' togetherness, to everyone to be happy celebrating this event. That is, the soccer itself is not the main goal. The main goal would be to unite every nation in celebration. But now we can see that that's not what happens. The World Cup is an institution created by people with power for their own interests. For example, they know the impact that the World Cup has on the people, and they use that impact to blind the people. That's the politics of Rome, the politics of wine and bread. It's simple to see. I understand the appeal. I understand that the World Cup is a great event and people like soccer and follow and scream, like a religion or something. I understand it. But we have to understand it bigger. We can't run away from that anymore. For example, the country that is where the World Cup is happening is in the middle of a war. That is reason enough to criticize it, to see that something is wrong. That is powerful, my friends, but at the same time we feel so powerless. that we feel that we can't do anything. But we can begin to think about these right questions. And the question would be, what is really the World Cup? What is it for? Look, I gave this example that is happening right now in the world, but we have countless examples. When we hear the media, the mainstream media, when we hear news everywhere, when you hear people talking and chattering about things and this and that, we can listen to that and we can think about it and criticize, but not in a specific way. Not right, not left, not in the middle, but we have to see it all. We have to try to see it all, because we are the human beings and we claim to be capable of such endeavors, like criticizing, like thinking and developing and creating. So we don't have any more time. Earth is telling us what is happening. She is the leader, she is guiding. And we, if not her, we are going to end ourselves. But we need to pay attention, because we have in our hands the opportunity to create something better. We have technology, we have everything, but we need to begin to criticize it, make the right questions. Who is this? What is the aim of things that are happening? We can see it, we're humans, we can see it. What is the aim of war? What is the aim of politics? What is the aim of extreme views in religion? We can see it, but we have to open our hearts to understand it. Remember, we don't have much time left. In this dystopic world, led by these psychopaths, now we have, for the first time in history, a trillionaire. The guy has $1 trillion. That's so sad, because at the same time we have kids on the streets asking for food. That is not acceptable. That is not acceptable. We claim to be capable of this and that, but we simply can't deal with small things, like giving dignity to every person on the planet. We can't do it. We have science says that to us every time. Numbers, we can do it. But that's the thing. We have to criticize it all, because to criticize is to make the right questions. And what are the right questions that must be made? That's the question I leave for you guys today. After all, everything is Mandala.